In video number 9, I did discuss several archaeological findings in which I made some rather speculative comments on the process that was going on at the temple premises. And in that context, I did show you a material balance of the sacrificial process, and I derived from that there must have been some kind of sewerage system to get rid of all the stuff that you don't want hanging around in the inner court of the temple. And in that context, I did speculate that a pit that is being excavated at the moment in the lower city, in the city of David, by a guy called Vukosavović, that this pit has something to do with that. But after having read the letter of Aristeas from 250 BC, which I discussed briefly in video number 14, I dared to upgrade this wild speculation to the level of intelligent guessing. Let me have a look again at this letter of Aristeas to his brother Philocrates in 250 BC, when he visited Jerusalem. At a certain moment during his visit, he was standing on a lofty place, as he described it, on the top of a citadel, overlooking the temple area and having a clear picture, a clear view on the process that was going on at the inner court of the temple. Now, I don't know about you, and I don't know whether you have ever read the Old Testament, the Tanakh, but I did, in fact, several times. But when I arrived at boring description of the layout of the tabernacle or the temple or all the different sacrifices and the associated rituals, well, let me put it this way, my attention span was not very long. And moreover, I do have a vivid imagination, but the picture I imagined, especially from those sacrificial rituals, weren't the ones I want to indulge in, if you understand what I mean. But let me warn you, because that is exactly what I am about to do here. And here it is. Let us read the text from Aristeas. So he is standing on the top of the citadel. He is having a view on what is going on in the inner court of the temple, and he is mentioning the following. Other priests, again, bring pieces of flesh to the burnt offering, exhibiting a wonderful degree of strength, for they take up with both hands the limbs of a calf, each of them weighing more than 2 talents, and throw them with each hand in a wonderful way onto the high place of the altar, and never miss placing them on a proper spot. And in the same way, the pieces of sheep and also of the goats are wonderful, both for their weight and their fatness. Now, let that sink in for a while. What I have in mind is a broad-shouldered Levite walking up to the altar with a big chunk of calf or meat, a leg of a cow or something on his shoulders, climbing up to the altar, 2 or 3 steps. This altar was huge, at least 25 square meters, and throwing this chunk of meat, this leg of a cow or the intestines, into the fire, and immediately stepping back, of course, due to the heat. While on the other side of the altar, another priest was just stepping up with large pieces of wood and throwing those in the fire as well. And just when this priest was stepping back, another priest was entering the scene with a bowl full of blood, throwing blood against the altar. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this picture isn't very pretty. But he gives us, Aristeas gives us more details. Let us look at those details. The construction of the altar was in keeping with the place itself and with the burnt offerings which were consumed by fire upon it, and the approach to it was on a similar scale. There was a gradual slope to it, conveniently arranged for the purpose of decency. Now maybe you don't get the picture yet, but that will become clear in a minute. And the ministering priests were robed in linen garments down to their ankles. The temple faces the east and its back toward the west. The whole of the floor is paved with stones and slopes down to the appointed places that water may be conveyed to wash away the blood from the sacrifices, for many thousands of beasts are sacrificed there on the feast days. Now, what is he describing here? Let us go to this picture here, and we will change this view. So, we have here a cross-section of the temple at that location. And what Aristeas is describing here is that this floor of the inner court was tilted. In this picture it's slightly exaggerated to make the point clear. I think exaggerated by a factor of 3, but that is not important. And so the floor was tilted because that makes sure that the water, which is arriving somewhere on this floor, was going into one direction. That is what is being described here. Now the question is, of course, where is all this water coming from? And that is described as well. There are moreover wonderful and indescribable cisterns underground, as they pointed out to me, at a distance of 5 furlongs all around the site of the temple, and each of them has countless pipes so that the different streams converge together. So, back to the picture here, what is being described is that the water is flowing on the basis of gravity from neighboring cisterns through pipes to the temple. And it is hard to imagine that for this location here, for the simple reason that the cisterns around this location, and I will show it for you here. Let me go to this layout, the temple here. If the temple would have been here, then those cisterns all around it are too low for them to deliver water on basis of gravity to this imagined site of the altar. The only one that is slightly higher is this one over here, but we are talking about 3 or 4, maybe 5 meters above the imagined altar, which will not give you much water pressure and maybe not enough water also. This water system, moreover, from this side is probably not that old. We know that this one was most likely from the time of Solomon, but this one is from later time, maybe even Hasmonean. And in that case, in case it was Hasmonean, it was non-existent when our friend Aristeas did describe this system. And that made it this site here, on top of the Temple Mount for the temple and the altar, impossible. And we will come back on that. We read further on the letter in the letter of Aristeas. What is he describing as well? There are many openings for the water at the base of the altar, which are invisible to all except for those who are engaged in the ministration. so that all the blood of the sacrifices which is collected in great quantity is washed away in the twinkling of an eye. Now, returning back to that cross section over here, and now in the right configuration. He describes flowing water from under the altar being supplied by pipes coming from subterranean cisterns, and then a tilted floor in order to force the water to one side of the temple, the inner temple court. So apparently there must have been some kind of a drainage, and that isn't an assumption anymore, like the previous time I was discussing this phenomenon, but it must have been a reality, because else the wastewater would have made a mess of the temple square. And the amount of water is considerable as well, exiting the base of the altar on multiple places, and the altar wasn't the only place that was in need of water. The copper sea, which was also at the inner court, did contain about 50 cubic meter of water, and it is impossible to imagine that this water to be stagnant. So therefore the water system was without a doubt connected to the copper sea as well. And the intestines of all the animals had to be emptied before being burned, and that is described in the Old Testament on several times, at least a dozen of times, and I will put one reference to it in the description. But the whole process requires a lot of water as well, and not to mention the animal droppings just prior the slaughtering of the animals. Now, during regular days, we are talking about at least 2 animals as a burnt offering, one in the morning and one in the evening, plus all the offerings on an incidental basis when an Israelite felt obliged to make an offering. But during the festivals, especially the Pesach, this number of animals must have been very high, maybe 1,000 and maybe even more. In a future video I will come back on that, by the way, on the logistics, the number of priests involved and the required space, and therefore the size of the temple. But in this video I want to stay focused on the water and water system. So based on this setup and this number of beasts, it is easy to imagine that the water flow must have been at least 10 cubic meters per hour and most likely more. And all this water had to go somewhere, a drainage system. And given the extreme focus on the hygiene aspect of the process involving the temple, no sick persons were allowed among the priests, all having washed themselves prior to arriving at the temple premises. They had to come there in clean garments. It was prescribed that even animals had to be healthy. So in this context of hygiene, it is hard to imagine that this water was just dumped outside, this contaminated water was just dumped outside of the city. And here in the story, we arrive at the pit that is being excavated just 25 meters or 30 meters south of the temple. And this piece of infrastructure, this pit, that was built, according to scientists, about 3,000 years ago, and has a volume of about more than 1,000 cubic meter, and I would say that is the right size, the right time, and the right place to function as a wastewater treatment facility for the temple, to be part of the wastewater system. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So now we have this picture in front of us. Aristeas was standing here on the top of a citadel. From this vantage point, he had a clear view on the inner court of the temple. And again, that wouldn't have worked from the situation where the temple was on top of the Temple Mount, and the citadel was about 250 meters away from it, as the conventional setup is. And so in that situation, it is clear that only all the temple on this location works. Now, if the scientists are right about this pit here, that it is from the 900 or 1000 BC, then I can tell you that this construction here with the water cistern, subterranean water system here close by, that this construction is also from the 10th or the 9th century BC, because they belong together. And from the Old Testament, we can derive that the Jebusites didn't have this water infrastructure because they lost the war against David when they were cut off from the Gihon spring. So they apparently didn't have any backup. So therefore this system here, if this system is from the 9th, 10th century BC, then that one is as well. So therefore I have to correct myself on the issue, and that is the age of this infrastructure here, because based on Josephus, who told me that the citadel was built by Hyrcanus I, so by the Hasmoneans, I did indicate that I expect Hasmonean infrastructure to be found on the southwest quarter of what is now called the Temple Mount. But with this information from Aristeas, way older archaeological findings are to be expected at that site, which is basically the water tower of the temple. Thank you for listening.